put a natural feeding to the test. From Scotland's Highlands to the coast of Dover, we are the raw feeders of Great Britain, yeah!
Good afternoon, welcome to the Raw Feeders of Great Britain podcast. Can you start by introducing yourself and tell people why I've asked you to come on the podcast today?
Hi, I'm Lana Smith, South Coast fairy dog mother, and I've been invited to talk to everyone about my niche, which is gluten intolerance in dogs and primarily Border Terriers.
Okay, cool. So it's more like breed specifics to offer terriers. Is that through personal experience?
It's actually all terriers, and there's over 60 breeds that gluten intolerance has scientifically been noted in. But it's most prevalent in Border Terriers, and I have a Border Terrier, so that is why I do what I do.
Perfect. So basically, it's relatability. Everybody that's struggling, you're in their shoes, so you can perfect person to help them, which is great. Now, for some people, obviously they've heard of gluten intolerance, but they've probably never even considered transferring it over to their dog. Um, can you explain what it is and how it develops and shows itself within dogs?
Goodness, that's a huge question. So the thing is, it's different for all breeds, but in Border Terriers specifically, it does go undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, overlooked, just medicated, and over time, it doesn't actually benefit the dog or their guardian. So what is gluten intolerance? It's very similar to celiac in humans. So with Border Terriers, for example, it is currently estimated, again, there's no official research data on this, but it's estimated that up to 50% of all Border Terriers suffer on a spectrum of gluten intolerance, either, gently or quite severely. And it can start looking like your average sort of inflammation markers, so dry nose, sticky eyes, dry eye. It goes misdiagnosed as you get the ear infections, the paw issue, or the leaky gut kind of symptoms like that, and then it escalates. So I've actually got a little checklist here. Because I've written it down. There's quite a lot to it.
Yeah, I don't expect you to get it off the top of your head because there's a lot of information to remember.
There is so much information. Do you know? So the thing is, I'm here because, I had Border Terriers all my life, kind of growing up. I actually started out with a Golden Retriever as a baby, but then had Border Terriers, and they always had like problems in terms of they were back and forth to the vets with allergies. They were really fussy with food. They would get ear infections, and for example, there is data now on the fact that I think it's like 94% of all gallbladder removal operations due to gallbladder mucoceles are performed on Border Terriers. And as a result, the insurance has gone up and people don't know why. This is why, because it's how we feed and look after our dogs. So I had a difficult puppy. I have a difficult dog through no fault of his own. And I struggled when he was a puppy because he wouldn't eat. I really tried desperately. I tried, novel proteins, novel feeding methods, and he would eat a food for like a day or two, or maybe even a week or two, and then he'd stop, had intermittently blood-streaked poops. He was 1 year old and got a UTI because he'd been on about 6 months of antibiotics. I was in and out of the vets, and this was all actually quite heavily documented on his Instagram page, but mostly really via stories, because I felt like I was doing something wrong and I couldn't find the information out there. And I didn't think that he had this canine epileptoid cramping syndrome because he wasn't shaking, he wasn't wobbling. So I didn't think he had Spike's disease. And I had no idea about the spectrum of symptoms and how they present, especially over time. And now, I am a canine well-being professional, and rather than working at the welfare end with the basic standard of welfare, I flipped it. I work at the other end. I help people help their dogs to thrive, because I have been on a baptism of fire. It's been about 6.5 years now, 6.5 year journey to being a first time border terrier mum, of having my own dog and being responsible and accountable and everything, going to my vets, going to the vets, going back to the vets, going to the specialists, being told, he's the healthiest dog we've seen. He doesn't have any skin issues. I don't know why he's here. Spent thousands of pounds. He lived on rounds of antibiotics, anti-inflammatories. He was on anti-anorexia medication, anti-nausea. He was on anti-bloody everything. It was costing me a fortune, and I've got like a 1 or a 2-year-old dog, and he's going through all of these medications. And I was really, really lucky that I had my own fairy dog mother. Was my neighbour, who is a dog trainer and knows so much. So she taught me a lot about training, because I was experiencing behavioural issues with him as a result. And I've been through this journey of training and understanding the importance of, relationship-based training, diet and nutrition. We would swap foods all the time. So she'd say, oh, I've got some of this, I've got some beef, and my guys don't want it. Or, do you want to swap it for that chicken or that pork or whatever? So we were then swapping raw food. And I did what people do. I went on the allaboutdogfood.co.uk website, and I looked at raw for puppies, and the best one that came out at the time was Able. I threw the book at it. I tried absolutely everything to help my dog, everything that I knew. And so over time, we'd gone from raw, and I didn't really understand the difference with like proteins, and I didn't really understand about ingredient intolerances. And my vet was coming back and saying, oh, I think it's allergies. So he was on Cytopoint medication and just everything. And you know what? If I knew then what I know now, I honestly believe he'd be a different dog. He would have a much more stable skeleton. He had months of malabsorption and gut issues as a puppy from following my vet's advice, because the vets don't know about these kind of lower grade symptoms and things like that. So I think I eventually kind of got there, and the penny dropped. He was about 3, and I got divorced and moved home, and people kept telling me on the Facebook groups, have you heard about this CCS? And I was like, no, he doesn't have that. No, he doesn't have that. And I can't remember who it was. Some angel said, please talk to this lady. She knows all about border terriers. She knows all about this. She's seen this time and time again, day in, day out for over 20 years. And even if you have a call with her, she will be able to help you. So there's a little Welsh lady who lives up a mountain who knows, I call her the Erin Brockovich of border terriers. She is phenomenal. Someone needs to knight this woman. She's fantastic. What she does for the breed and for people is phenomenal. So I had a chat with this lady, and everything kind of fell into place. She said, yes, they do get these symptoms. They do get these symptoms. And I think Augustus was about 3 months old when he was just walking around the sofa. I think I was working in the living room because it was COVID. And I was very busy. I wasn't one of those people who was kind of laid off and getting drunk in the sun every day for 6 months. My workload increased astronomically. I was working at a charity at the time. And I loved to capture him coming around corners, and when he saw my face just being all cute, so I videoed him, and as he came around the corner of the sofa, he looked a bit drunk and wobbly, and I was videoing this, and this is the only time I have this on video, actually, because, yeah, as I said, he was 3 months old. And I sent this video to my neighbour, and I said, oh, you've got a dog first aid certificate. I thought, she knows so much. She knows about the food. She knows about training. She knows about dog health and well-being. Does she know about this? And she said, you need to send that to your vet immediately. That is not normal. And by the time I'd pressed record, and then the time it had taken him, because he was in another room, I don't know how long he'd been wobbly for. The time he got to me, he was then fine again. And so that was actually him having a neurological epileptoid episode. And it was only talking to this lady that I realised actually he'd gone through the full symptom spectrum. It had been completely overlooked and misdiagnosed. And at 3 months old, at the time that was quite young, he was having this quite severe episode. But then, boom, that just like that, it's over. And then he's, quote unquote, fine again. There's so many things. There are so many things.
It does seem quite scary to witness and deal with dogs. So fair play to you for composing yourself, because that's going to be difficult.
Thank you. It was really hard. Yeah. So your lower grade symptoms are fussy eating, 101. Your dogs are so smart. They can smell a diabetic hypo half an hour before the technology can even pick it up. They smell Alzheimer's and cancer. The fact that dogs wouldn't know what they're eating. No, of course they know. And I've got a really fun, a fun analogy that if we could see as far as a dog could smell, we'd be able to see New York. So of course, scent work, nose work, all that sort of thing. You put some food down for them, and if they don't want to eat it, I honestly believe it's for a jolly good reason. They know what's in there. So fussy eating is the biggest one, picking out food or food refusal. And again, the odd bad poop. So they're not always terrible. Sometimes it's once every other week. Sometimes it's once every 6 weeks. Sometimes it's every day. It's really difficult to know. You get dry nose, lots of reverse sneezing, more than normal, or when they get over arousal threshold as well. And the vets and the specialists don't see these lower grade things because the dog's got 4 legs, 2 ears, 2 eyes, and a tail, and it's moving, it's fine. And then you start getting itchy ears. And I used to see, I'd look at, and I still look now at Augustus's puppy pictures, and he'd just have a blue sheen over both of his eyes, and they'd look a little bit sunken. And turns out that's a really strong red flag, is an inflammation marker, and it's his system not coping with what's inside it. So that is, his liver is not detoxing, and all of his other internal organs are really struggling because of his food and treats and what I was feeding him, which I honestly believed was the best. Like I said, I threw the book at it. He had Abel, he had a different dog. I tried everything, from Tails to Royal Canin, absolutely everything. Pedigree, Chum, Chappie, and it just, the vets would shrug and say, oh, I don't know, have you tried Chappie? And because obviously it's so kind of hydrolyzed, it was really tricky. But that's exactly what was going on. And I also noticed that he had oily urine. So the sheen that was over his eyes, when he weed, it was quite thick and concentrated, and it had an oily look to it. And again, that's his body struggling to process what's in there. And then I had the behavioural issues, and he would bounce off the wall. His pain displacement behaviour was everything from initiating play to just barking and not coming down arousal levels. He'd have me up every night or every other night, and then it was every couple of nights, 3 and 5 a.m. He'd need to go outside, he'd do a poop, he'd want to eat grass, he'd be sick, and he was 1 year old. And why does it always happen at Christmas? He was 1 year old, and he was really annoying me because I was trying to work and he kept going to the back door. I was like, you've already been out. I've been up and down, I don't know, 20 times in half an hour. So you don't need to keep going out. He had a UTI. And the UTI got so bad, and I took him into the vets. My helpful neighbour told me exactly how to capture that sample. Thank you so much, Carrie. And they said, yeah, he's got this, more antibiotics again, without even testing it. But then over Christmas and New Year, when the vets were closed, and obviously it was COVID as well, so I wasn't even allowed to go in with him or anything like that, it got worse. So then he had prostatitis, and his prostate was so inflamed and large. One of the vets at my practice said, we need to castrate him because that will reduce the size of his prostate. And I was like, no. Hang on a minute. I've got a science degree. I know stuff. And there's no way that a castration is going to cure an infection. And they said, you reduce the testosterone and then the prostate would go down in size, da 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 da. Honestly, the things I followed my vet's advice and did to my little darling 1-year-old puppy. He had a prostate wash, which is very invasive. And that was to find out exactly what this infection was. And then again, more antibiotics to try and fix it. And actually it was the probiotics then that helped. So this is literally, it just tears my heart apart now what I did to this dog following professional advice. He then became really reactive. He then got compulsive behaviour, licking his feet. He would get hot spots, just kind of like in his muzzle. He would get hiccups quite frequently. And he'd be laying in bed and I'd have my arm around him. This is a border terrier. He's like the perfect size for me to just snuggle him with my hand. But I would feel his tummy just cramping. And I just thought, oh, that's interesting. I don't know if dogs do that. Maybe they do. Maybe that's just his guts working. Maybe that's just how dogs are. I don't know. And he'd do lots of stretching. He was always eating grass. Sometimes, the foamy, grassy morning pukes or that sort of thing. He'd get bouts of what I now know as colitis. I just thought poop was poop. I thought sometimes that's a bit gross, a bit yellow, a bit mucusy. I was like, but it's gone in, something's gone in and something's come out. And the vet said it's fine, so it must be fine. But then blood tests he started being tested for Addison's disease, and it's normally misdiagnosed as suspected Addison's or atypical Addison's. You see that in the Border Terrier health reports for the breed. Also, they worry about liver shunt and things like that. And you get low folate and low B12 from malabsorption because the gut wall integrity just doesn't exist, and there's no microbiome because it's continuously being shared. And then you get lots of stretching, lots of shaking off, and then they start like lip licking and head bobbing. And I always thought it was really weird because Augustus had a best friend who was also a Border Terrier growing up, and they lived down the road around the corner. And if we gave Waffle a treat, she would eat it like a normal dog. But Augustus would go and he'd eat it. like he was kind of breathing in, like gasping. And I just thought, oh, your dog does things like that, but my dog does things like this. How bizarre. And then I thought, all dogs are different. But actually, again, that's him like being petrified, psychologically damaged to even take treats and things like that. And he's so scared that what mummy was going to put into his system was going to make him feel really poorly and really bad. I tried every tracker. He used to run off. I lost him like 5 times. Heart attacks that no one needs to have. And during adolescence, it was carnage. So his best friend's parents offered to look after him one day for me while I went out with some friends. And when I collected him, they handed him back and said, never again. That was horrendous. So like what I'd considered to be normal puppy behavior or adolescence or things like that, they were like, no, this is not normal. And I was like, okay. And then I started noticing that he'd be out walking and he'd walk a bit funny, had like a funny gait. Sometimes he'd start like suddenly sitting down and he couldn't move. He's a young dog, and lots of dogs sit down on walks and refuse to move. But this was really sudden, and he'd try and stand up and then he couldn't. And actually, these are all massive red flags and signs of pain. And if we were sitting just like Netflix and chilling, he would suddenly just look at his back end and then nib, 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 nib it. Now, this could either be shooting pains, pins and needles, but it looks like electric shocks running through the entire back end, like all down the back legs, through the tail, and then they nib, 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 nib. And he would do that again, like every so often, not all the time. And then you've got your full-blown spasmodic episodes, which sometimes look like they're kind of pretzeling because they can't control their limbs. And the thing is, what happens is if the body isn't able to process the gluten or whichever ingredient you're putting in, it can be peas, for example, but with the gluten specifically, and it's hidden in ingredients too, like brewer's yeast and fermented algae powder, stuff like that. It builds up over time, and your dog's system is so strong and it tries to get rid of it, but it builds up over time and then it just can't. And then the body reaches a threshold and that kind of spills over, and then you get these uncontrollable muscle spasms. And the other thing that you hear is a very gurgly tummy, like super loud. And you can hear the guts like stretching and shedding. And this is a protective mechanism for the body because there's something so bad in the system, it's trying to get it out. And it's only over time and, lots of trial and error on my own part, working out what works and what doesn't work for Augustus. So then retrospectively go back and find out why these things that I found are working. So I'm on at the moment the L3 with the IPET network for canine nutrition, which is an Ofqual regulated qualification. It's not just, a quick 2-week course that I bought off Instagram or something like that. It's cost me thousands of pounds and hours of research and everything else. And now I'm on this course and I'm meeting these people and these biome scientists and these other specialists and experts and integrative vets and holistic practitioners. Everything is falling into place, but again, like backwards. So now I'm working out why things that work and how they work. So I've managed to find out so much just from my own knowledge and first-hand experience. And now I know why, and like the mechanisms and things like that and the biology. And it's been such a whirlwind. But he's well now. He's really well today. I've got management systems in place. My boyfriend is thoroughly briefed. And I think to begin with, he didn't really appreciate how poorly he gets. And he used to get really poorly, and one contamination would set him back like 2 weeks. He'd be really sick for 2 weeks. We'd get stuck in this cycle of doom where he'd want to eat, he couldn't eat, then he'd get really hungry, and then he wouldn't eat. So I'd take him out for a walk to do some running and empty himself. And then someone had dropped like a schmacko or something, and then he'd gobble that, and obviously then that's full of just absolute rubbish. And then he'd go hyperactive, and then that would make him worse, and then he wouldn't eat again, and then we'd be up in the night eating like self-selecting things in the garden, being sick, pooping blood, and it was just this absolute roller coaster horror show. But since finding out how to heal him, seal his gut, rebuild his microbiome, if he is triggered, which, you know, we are only human and he is only an animal, he recovers like that now, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And you know, I see so many border terriers on the Facebook groups, you know, with reactivity or running off, and there are breed specific and, you know, type specific schools that use e-collars and things like that, when actually these dogs are performing these behaviors because they're in pain and they don't know how to feel or what to do, or of course they can't listen. They've got brain fog, and you know, they're so worried about the physical trigger stacking because they're in so much pain. There's no way they can like listen to you. They're not going to say, "Oh yeah, let's come back to mummy." They're going to be like, "Ah!" Stop, you know? And I've seen it with my own dog. But I've again managed to, you know, use positive relationship based techniques to keep him in what I call the circle of dreams, where all the good stuff comes from me, sky food falls from the middle, like all these little tips and tricks, and also listening to him. So, you know, I've learned everything from my dog, and the more we can understand our dogs and listen to them and interpret their behavior as feedback, the more they know that we are on their team and we're fighting for their well-being, not just their welfare. You know, well-being is completely the other side of the spectrum. So what I would want to do is just save all the dogs, basically. Who doesn't? Because what I've learned with my border terrier, I've helped, you know, countless other border terriers, other terriers, you know, retrievers and Great Danes and cockapoos, poodles. You know, this gluten intolerance is also quite prevalent in poodles, and everything just gets kind of shut down as IBS or IBD or chronic enteropathy, or, you know, whatever people are calling it nowadays. And actually, when we can look at and understand ingredients, we can help our dogs. But so much that's on the market is just the same reconstituted rubbish, you know. And there's even gluten in raw food, which is really annoying, because if anything contains wheat germ oil, for example, that contains gluten, brewer's yeast, yeah, all these things. So you think, I'll raw feed my dog or I'll home cook, but then all the balances have got gluten in, or they've got pea protein or something like tapioca starch, like brown rice, and all these other ingredients and the molecules that they contain are enough to irritate an already very sensitive gut. So this one gluten issue can then set up a whole like cascade to be triggered by the dog's immune system based on so much. I've been talking quite a lot.
I've been listening a lot because you've got quite the story, and you know what? I guarantee a lot of people are going to relate to it, because the reason why I get trends and behaviours on here as well is because nutrition and that side are very, very linked. And what you've experienced with the gluten side of it, the gluten, like I said, is the first domino that had a cascade,
Yeah.
and everyone that fell, every other domino after that got bigger and bigger. And by the time you're in a really bad way because of that final domino's fallen, more often than not, when you go down the vet route, they're looking at that last domino. They're not looking back at the history to find out, hang on, which is the first domino that fell. And there's not many people that do that, or even are able to do that. But it just shows that tiny little thing makes a massive difference. So as a genetic standpoint, like I said, if the genetically predisposed to it, then it should be gluten-free diet as a breed standpoint, just to eliminate that risk factor.
Well, the thing is, some breeders do breed puppies and they'll come with, like, I don't know, Paleo Ridge or some other kind of raw food. And they'll say, you have to raw feed this dog. But that's not always, not everyone can raw feed. Not everyone wants to raw feed. And then the thing is, they'll go to, Schmetz at Schmome or somewhere like that, and they will pick up something that they think is good. But I think that what people don't realize is you can walk into any pet shop, and pretty much most of the stuff as you're walking down the aisle is all the same reconstituted stuff with like different marketing and natural this and buzzwords and different colors, and everyone's kind of being sold a dream. And you think, oh, I'll try this one, or I'll try that one, or I'll try this one, and then the dog might get better, but then it doesn't get best. It doesn't actually help the dog long term. And then they're left scratching their heads and they're on like Apoquel, Cytopoints, and Relia. And, long term, it's really not good for dogs. It's incredibly detrimental for their health. And it shuts off entire immune pathways. And no wonder we've got so many dogs with like pancreatitis, gallbladder mucosal, all this kind of stuff. Um, I've seen dogs at the age of 4 on Instagram that have died from complications due to surgery, when the entire kind of lifetime of data and evidence is this dog has got gut issues and is suffering and is in pain. But because the person will think, oh, well, I went to my vet and my other dogs are fine, there's just something wrong with this dog, because this dog has got that genetic marker, probably. And you think that all dogs are the same and you want to feed all your dogs the same thing, but they're not. Every dog is different. Even within the same litter, they're going to be different. And one size doesn't fit all. And that's why, I've got a Great Dane, a Cockapoo, and a Border Terrier. And they all have different foods. But to see these other dogs suffering because the vets don't know. So what I call the cycle of doom is that oh, hang on, where is it? I've got to get the right slide. Systematic failures. So the breed groups are supposed to collate all the data and the evidence every year. And it only happens if people submit the data and the evidence to the breed group. So, for example, the Border Terrier Health Organisation. And if you don't have positive, what's called a gliadin test result, which is the gluten sensitivity test, if you don't have that and your vet hasn't officially diagnosed you, then they just say, oh, it's suspected, it's probably not. So none of that gets counted. And people change the food. And then they go from something that contains grain to something that's grain-free. And even if it's grain-free, it still contains gluten most commonly, which is really annoying. And they change the food so the data doesn't exist. And then the breed group doesn't have the data to publish. And once that data is published, it's supposed to be kind of fed into the vet system. But because the data doesn't exist, the vets don't have the data, and they need that scientific data to prove, how prolific this issue is. And they just, misdiagnose, overlook, they don't understand, they don't know about this condition. They've got no idea how common it is and how frequently it's seen. And they might say, oh, I've heard something about Spike's disease, just go gluten-free. but that's not enough because of other contaminations. And you need to have the knowledge and the management systems in place to make sure that your dog's not being contaminated by bird feeders in the garden, sharing toys and water bowls with other dogs. Some dogs are so sensitive that that's enough to trigger quite a severe reaction. And they're like, oh, I don't know, maybe they picked something up, or I try so hard, but every so often, like, this happens. And so you do need control and management in place with that. And then without the people knowing about it, because the vets don't know about it, they can't then report it to the breed groups. So all of these points where we're supposed to be able to be supporting our dogs and their health and their well-being, failing at every single hurdle. And that's why I'm so vocal about it, so passionate about it, because if I don't talk about it, I don't really think that many other people are talking about it. And if you can get a gliadin test to prove that the dog is gluten sensitive, it is really accurate if your dog is on a gluten containing diet. But then you're stuck because you don't want to give them gluten, because you don't want to make them sick to prove to yourself something that you already kind of strongly suspect. Because how ethical is that, to make your dog sick to prove a point to
Get that.
So it's really hard. And then the vets will charge you like £450 for a gluten sensitivity test, and it's just a quick blood test. But there is a company called Labiclin UK, which is an independent lab, and it's £96. But the vets charge a lot more. But if your vet can draw the blood and spin the serum, you can post it on ice in a jiffy bag to Labiclin, and then you'll just get the results sent back to you and just post that off to your vet as an FYI to officially diagnose. Then that needs to go to the breed groups. Guess how many Border Terriers in, I think it was 2024, were confirmed as having this canine epileptoid cramping syndrome?
I wouldn't have a clue, but I'd like to say it'll be at least around the 50% of them anyway.
Just give me, like, I don't know, a number between 1 and 1,000.
666.
11 dogs.
11.
11. Because the data isn't being fed back. That's shocking. And I see 11 dogs on these Facebook groups at least every week.
Yeah,
And they're only getting 11 recorded a year.
and I suppose that'll only be the ones that are also registered as like part of the kennel club as well. Because there's a lot
So
of
many people don't know about the health organisation. They don't know about the test. They don't understand about the gluten and ingredients. And no wonder the data doesn't exist.
this is like it touches on something that I always say. We all look for evidence-based stuff and go with what the science says and things like that. But the science can't say anything if no one's looking. And just because it's not there doesn't mean it doesn't exist or it doesn't apply. Which is why I like to keep everything as balanced as I can. Because yes, I like to go with evidence-based as best as I can. But just because it's not in a textbook somewhere doesn't mean it's not happening. So it's always good to stay open-minded. And this whole gluten thing, I touched on this a while ago because obviously the raw feeding side of it. A lot of people think raw feeding is gluten free, even on like a DIY approach, because they don't feed anything that contains gluten. But my issue with it at the moment, especially with all these low and budget brands, is their sourcing. Because if they're using, like for example, getting beef, and they're getting meats that have come from previously from the human chain that was intended for human consumption, and then they take it on, maybe like gone past its sell by anything like that. Some of these steak cuts, especially in supermarkets, like like the essential steaks, like really budget low end ones, 9 times out of 10, it's actually two inferior cuts that have been glued back together with meat glue. Now, meat gluten in humans has been shown to trigger and worsen like celiac disease because it basically it triggers that gluten sensitivity. The same applies for dogs if they've got that sensitivity. So it doesn't mean raw's automatically safe for them. It depends on the sourcing because you can be as clean as you can, but as soon as you're using a sauce that uses a meat sauce that's got meat gluten in it, you're back to square one. But you'll be constantly scratching your head, not knowing why. And that's why I shared that a couple of weeks ago because not a lot of people are aware when they fall for the marketing of human grade ingredients, it can contain meat gluten, and that can put you back to square one. So you have to be pay really close attention to where you're getting your produce from.
So ways that my dog has been contaminated. He had a terrible contamination in, I think it was November, December last year. And I've been working with Blind for Pets, and he was in peak condition. He'd had the opportunity to be contaminated and it just didn't touch him. I felt like he was absolutely invincible. I was on the best run of health of his entire life, which is significant. And then I was like, great, okay, here we go. So I saw a Black Friday sale on, and I thought, okay, so beef is a safe protein. So I got a load of beef products. We had like trachea and things like that. And I saw some gullet and I picked that up. And I like to introduce novel things to him because they do have, I would say it's kind of semi-restricted. We've got about 5 or 6 safe proteins, but we do lots of training, they get lots of treats. So it's always good to mix things up and keep things interested. Otherwise, my boy especially, he's like, so I gave him some beef gullets, and it was like a big long strip of beef gullets, thinking beef is safe for him, it's a safe protein. And actually then he was so poorly, and compared to how well he'd been, he was horrendous. And I looked at the beef gullets, and through the strip of the smooth muscle, there were
Grain.
the grain was in the gullets. So whatever that cow had eaten before it had died was there in the meat. And this was not a grass-fed and finished cow because costs. So I had unwittingly contaminated my dog with something that normally as well he would kind of say, no, I don't want that. He was super keen for it because it was new and exciting and beefy. And the grain that the cow had eaten was enough. So there are raw brands that I can't feed safe proteins because they will buy beef lip, and they don't wash those lips before they're processed and put into the food. And also he can't have tripe because that grain moves through the digestive system into the stomach, and even kind of being broken down by that live microbiome. Gluten is a really sticky substance, and it's not always fully digested, and that's enough to contaminate him. Even, I live by the New Forest, and the wild pony poops, very high in lactobacillus, good for the microbiome. But thank you, Dr. Carol Hughes from Blind for Pets, for this helpful information. But if you have got horse poop that is stabled and these horses are fed grain, that's also going to move through. So I have to know the difference between like a wild pony poop and an organised ride poop. It's normally different. You've got a different kind of size and texture and things like that. But I have to watch and monitor and manage every single aspect. And to begin with, it's really overwhelming because there's so much to learn and so much to know and so much to manage. And the sleepless nights, racking my brain, what set him off this time, all of this stuff. And I've been able to pinpoint almost anything, even to the point where, I'd go out for dinner and I'd have, I don't know, chicken satay or something like that, or even like sushi with soy sauce. It's all got gluten in it. So if I come home and I either haven't washed my hands, or I've been round to a friend's house and they'd had pizza, and I try and fully decontaminate as much as possible and constantly hand washing. But we'd said goodbye and they'd touch my arm, and then I'd woken up the next day and we'd have a cuddle and be licking me and licking my skin. That touch contamination from someone eating a pizza the day before on my arm is enough to trigger him. There's all of these things that you have to, luckily I've got a forensic science degree, right? That you have to be able to break it down to these micro moments to understand like what on earth is done at this time, because then you can put preventative measures in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. Even if it's, you have a pizza, you fully, clean the house, wash every door handle, light switch, the back of the chairs, mobile phones. I hoover then and wipe the floor, and the fridge, all these things, the tap handle in the sink, all of this stuff. It has to be done, and it can be really exhausting. But you know what's more exhausting, Michael? Having a sick dog.
Of course, we agree.
Yeah, and it's just there's so much that goes into it, and it is overwhelming. But you get there, and you manage, because you have to at the end of the day. And even my boyfriend, who is a big sausage roll fan, we used to have a lot of bread in my house, and now it's quite a gluten-free zone. I feel like I used to do a lot of baking as well, and it's an extreme sport in my house because the amount of decontamination that has to go on, it's not worth the cake. So, yeah, it's a lot, and it's now a lifestyle, but it's something that we just kind of take in our stride, and we make sure that water bowls are cleaned and everything goes in the dishwasher, and the dishwasher is clean and decontaminated. We use all completely different utensils, because even if I do some home cooking for my guys, if I use a bowl or a wooden spoon that I'd use for like a pasta and a pasta sauce a couple of weeks ago, that's another potential for contamination. And it's all of these things, and there's so much.
Bit of a minefield, really is.
And people wonder why. They're like, I don't know why it is. And so then I run through my list. Could it be this? Could it be that? Because my boy's been contaminated by so much and so many things. And they think, oh yeah, I didn't realise about that. The pasta is on the shelf above the dog treats in my house next to the fridge. You have to swap that around so the pasta doesn't fall out and kind of contaminate the pasta does contaminate the dog treats. Whenever you move to a completely different side of the house or a different cupboard, or you've got to do what you can, and need to know which foods to trust, because there are some great foods out there as well, some really good raws, and trying to find the right balance and the right mix for everyone's dog is my speciality.
When it comes down to the raw, then obviously based on your own experience, which brands would you specifically recommend that are safe for something indoor to use?
This could be a controversial one. So I really love Benefit. I think they have fantastic recipes, but to feed a Great Dane on Benefit, not particularly cost
Yeah,
effective. So we do like to rotate. So my safe raws for rotation are Benefit. We've had some great results from the Dog's Butcher. There are some good nutriment raw recipes, not all of them, but some. Paleo Ridge are pretty good as well. But my guys have Durham.
yeah. So is my mags.
Really? Single protein, they love the duck and pumpkin, the beef and blueberry, the wild boar and the pork mince. I can control a lot with the single ingredient, and it doesn't work for all dogs. And some brands will say, you know, it's raw lamb, and then you look at the ingredients, it's got bloody chicken in or something like that. You know, it's really hard to find some good ones, but they're my go-to.
Okay, cool. Because a lot of people said being your choose, and it's just a good starting point if they did want to go down the raw route of knowing where to start. And by the sounds of it, you've built up your own little blueprint master plan of how to deal with this. You can help other owners through that process and help them to identify certain things that you've noticed within your own, because they may not even thought of that. But like I said, if you can avoid that first domino falling and catch it early enough, you're going to save that dog a whole lot of trouble long term. Because
So
it's,
much suffering, but Michael, so much money. You save so much money because you're not in and out the vets trying 100 different things, wasting your own time and energy. You know, you just get it right first time. You know, no faff. I feel like I've got a bit of a cheat code to dog wellness with what I know and the brands and, you know, suppliers that I trust.
yeah, that's exactly what people need. Um, so yeah, I will do your, like I said, a massive shout out in the group for people that have recently transitioned that may notice the symptoms that you've been talking about on this. I'll get them to watch it and then obviously give you a shout because yeah, I reckon more dogs will be issues with gluten than people realise, and swapping to grain free isn't enough. Um, because
Oh,
even on the packaging, they know they're not infallible. It says made in a factory that handles grains, so they know there could be gluten in it anyway. And obviously, some of the ingredients that aren't grains may also contain gluten, or processed versions of things like that. So it's very, very handy because, like I say, if we can help people avoid that first domino falling, it saves people so much time because, especially like behavior. So as soon as you notice all the digestive side of it and the microbiome does become affected, like, it's documented that the body then can't produce enough. Now, I'm really rubbish with literacy, so I only know the letters, which is DAO. I can't pronounce the long technical word. Anyway, the enzyme that breaks down histamines. And when it's not producing enough of that, histamines build, which is why they'll get trouble sleeping. They'll start pacing at night and things like that, and lead to behavioural issues because they're not sleeping enough. Um, which a lot of people that have the behaviour side of it won't even think about.
so many people get behaviour, and for example, in the breed health organisations reports, they split everything out into different kind of issues within the breed. But there's so much reactivity within border terriers. There's so much behaviour associated with pain and gut pain. Even the musculoskeletal issues can be from this bad diet, malabsorption. You know, the dogs might not have enough teeth, or you know, maybe the hip or the elbow joints didn't properly form because that dog was malnourished during puppyhood and it wasn't able to grow and actually absorb the vitamins and the minerals from the food that's in there. You know, maybe what was synthetically added to the puppy food wasn't actually bioavailable to these dogs. And then you've got that gut barrier issue, and you can put stuff in, but it's not getting through and it's not being used by the body or the system. You know, and don't even get me started on histamine. What a nightmare that is. I've had to get really into herbalism and that sort of thing for basically free antihistamine, you know, liver detox support, because it all adds up. It's so expensive.
It does, yeah. And it's good, but when you step back and look at the whole picture, and when you do it with an understanding of that first domino, you realise how much of a web that one can cast out, and how much it affects the dog as an individual. And the fact that you've already done that and created a roadmap for people, and you can help people save them time and money and put their dogs in a better position. It's only a good thing. And I'll be honest with you, I've checked out your prices. You're not even that expensive. I think you should charge more, but that's just me.
Well, it depends what you're paying for. If you're, I spoke to a lady yesterday who's on, I don't know what, £30 a month, the dog's vet subscription. And with that, you get a flea tick and wormer tablet that contains gluten, and every month she's glutening her dog because of in the name of prevention of disease. And over time, that's wearing out this dog's entire immune system and functionality. Um, and if you're not continuously, stimulating immune systems in ways it probably doesn't need to be stimulated, tied to testing, hello, then if you take that £30 a month that's making your dog sick and you put it into a better food, a higher grade raw, you know, a water filter that takes out microplastics and heavy metals and the forever chemicals and things like that, then you're going to be infinitely putting so much more health and like vitality into your dogs. You're building a stronger boat to be able to weather the storms, basically.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To be fair, you look at the foundations, you see where they need strengthening, and then you support those foundations and you build on top of it because you can't build on something that's rocky. Otherwise, like you say, when it does
The whole
fall,
thing.
yeah, but you won't know what's caused it either. And the fact that you've linked this in, and just to for anybody that's watching, it's not just specific to border terriers; it's dogs in general.
Would you like the full list, Michael, of all
Yeah,
the dogs
go ahead.
currently for the data in the research groups? Ahem. Okay, so all terriers, all terriers, mostly border terriers, but Maltese terriers, Boer terriers, Wheaton terriers, Patterdales, Bulls, Jack Russells, like the full shebang. Every terrier breed this has been seen in. Lancashire Heelers, Corgis, Papillons, Minpins, Louchens, Chinese Cresteds, Bolognese, Italian Greyhounds, Frenchies, Pugs, Bostons, Japanese Chins, Havanese, Shih Tzus, Lhasa Apsos, Lhasa Apsos, Bichons, and Poodles and Poodle Crosses. How many of those have we got running around right
Yeah,
now?
yeah,
It's also seen in Chihuahuas, Pomeranians, Kokinos, Cleekeyes, Basset Hounds, Beagles, Dachshunds, Whippets. In Spaniels, it's seen in Springers, Cockers, Brittany's, and Cavaliers. It's seen in Dalmatians and Boxers, Irish Setters, Retrievers, Labradors, hello, most popular breed in the UK, Pointers, Hungarian Vizslas, Poolies, Portuguese Podongos, Italian Water Dogs, Lagottos, Collies, Kelpies, Australian Shepherds, Cattle Dogs, Pyreneans, Rottweilers, Huskies, St. Bernards, all of the Schnauzers, Spitz, Jindos, Basenjis, and Catahoulas at the moment.
I think you've been a short list to tell me which ones don't apply.
Probably. There'll be some very niche breeds in there.
Yeah, definitely. And there's me. I've got a Rottweiler cross Staffy. You know what I mean? It's just got the best of both of us. Um,
Also, pinchers. So everything from like your pins to your dobes, it's also seen in them as well. Shocking.
it's definitely interesting, especially like you said, when when it comes down to the doodles and all these designer dogs now, because we all know that they are one of the most misbehaved dog breeds around, and they are quite
Look at
notorious.
Frenchies.
Yeah,
How many Frenchies have we got that are all suffering with skin conditions and allergies and itching and they can't breathe and on top of everything. Um, and all you need to do is heal the gut, heal and seal the gut, support the microbiome, remove any potential triggers, and just feed a fresh diet and make sure that the rest of the lifestyle is low tox and
yeah.
supported, and you've got a completely different dog.
Do you know what? Do you know what would be fascinating to see if there's any correlation to? Because obviously, do you know, the golden nugget for that the pet food industry that love to use is obviously the genetic adaptation with the AMID2 gene to digest starches. but obviously it's not universal. The copies, I think, run from 4 to 30. It'd be interesting to know if those number of copies had an impact on how sensitive they were to gluten.
You just need to do a £96 gluten intolerance test if your dog is currently on a diet containing gluten. And that also includes treats. So if you're feeding, like, I don't know,
Have you got
anything
like
from
a
the
link or
supermarket.
anything? Have you got a link or anything that I can put underneath this episode for that?
I really wish I had. I need to probably talk to the Labiclin guys. I really wish I knew how many dogs I'd sent to Labiclin and actually had a positive gluten sensitivity test result.
Yeah, talk to them, because, like I say, if you are sending people their way, if they can give you even like a promo code or even like a commission-based link, do it, because it does help.
I'd love a promo code. Yeah, I'd like to know. I think so. It's really hard to maintain impartiality if you're getting kickbacks and things like that. And the brands and the suppliers that I do work with, some used to send me free samples to make content around. Some still do, but I don't always make lots of content around kind of everything that I use all the time. And, I don't make money off the things and the brands and the products that I promote. Sometimes I just get a discount on it as well, but I still got to pay, I don't know, 90% of what the cost is. And I do think it's hard because, if I did have to pay full price for everything, I would be so out of pocket and, living on loans and that sort of thing. Because it does get expensive, especially when you've got a Great Dane and 3 dogs and everything else, and a Border Terrier that suffers so much. It's tough. But I do have lots of discount codes for many, not all, but many of my trusted brands and suppliers. And it's only really to be able to pass that discount on to people who have been in the same situation as me, who have bought that miracle bag of dog food and paid, I don't know, 80 quid for it, only to be opened and eaten from once, and then the dog refuses it. I had a freezer full of food that he wouldn't eat, and you spend so much money on this next promise. You hope that the one thing that these dog food brands say they can do, they're actually able to do. And in my experience, so often it's just not true. And so I just want to help people that have also forked out what feels like a bazillion pounds, between the vets and the industry to try and help their dog.
Yeah, definitely not. Yep, I agree. You should do it, but don't feel bad about using promo codes to make money from, because at the end of the day, things like that help you keep their costs lower, so you don't have to charge them as much for your help. If that makes sense.
It helps keep me going and help me being here full time, being able to help and support people, effectively 24/7. I don't think I could go back to an office job anymore. I love being self-employed and I love what I do. I love being able to see the transformations, and I've got a lot of case studies going up on my website quite soon because I've been able to help so many people, and it's been absolutely life changing for them. And that's all I want for everyone. I go to these conferences and these events, and I'm so overwhelmed by how many people are there and they genuinely care about the well-being of dogs. They care as much about some dog that they've never met and they don't know as they do their own. Like, that passion is so strong, which is why this whole industry exists. And I just think it's so wonderful, and there are so many good people doing fantastic things for people and their dogs out there, and it's exciting. It's exciting times.
Definitely is. So on that note, except for, 'cause I need to get Maggie out before she starts chewing on my feet. So we'll wrap it up. But what I will say is, if you've got anybody that would like to come on the podcast, let me know and tell them to reach out, or vice versa, and we'll make it happen. So obviously, more people the better, that are obviously on the same side, or could just even on the opposite side, that we can bring different contexts to keep everybody's minds open. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be an echo chamber. In fact, I don't want it to be. Um, so yeah, honestly, anyone you can think of that you think deserves a bit of limelight, get pushed out there, by all means, please let me know.
Yeah, I will. I'll pass the pod.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. But yeah, I'll let you go. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to be able to share everything.
Thank you.